Hey, this is JW from Stummy Down Pod checking in with attendance bias. When Phish announced their return in October of 2008, I was actually sitting at my desk in my classroom during my planning period. There had been some rumors that something might happen. They were going to get back together or whatever. But as with everything Phish rumor wise, I never really put any stock into anything until it actually happens. So there I was watching the video, watching the image take shape, and that feeling of just pure excitement and joy when it became apparent the painting was of Hampton. The mothership was going to be where they were coming back was pretty cool. I'm sure my story isn't unique in that many others experienced the same emotions as they watched the video over and over. Word got out quick with our crew, and as Skinny, my co-host on Stub Me Down, reminded me, a bunch of us got together that night to game plan getting tickets and just to celebrate the announcement and the potential for Phish being back out there. I got to hit the first two shows of the Hampton return, and I've never felt an energy out of Phish show like that since. But that's for another time. Thanks, Brian, and thank you, Phish. We never needed you like this before.
Hey, Brian, it's Chris Casey, and I'm going to tell you that I don't exactly remember where I was when the announcement was made. But what I can tell you is right before that, it surfaced that they all played, I believe it was Jason Colton's wedding, and there were some photos, and, I think someone might have had some audio, but after that, the internet was pretty much on the rumor train that they have to be getting back together. So I think it wasn't too much after that they made the announcement. Again, don't remember exactly where it was, but it actually was one of those things that it wasn't that surprising because you figured you kind of got cleaned up, everyone's aged a few years, and it seems like the right time to get back at it. So that's what I remember about it.
Hey, Brian, Skinny from Stub Me Down. Thanks for letting me talk about Phish's comeback in 2009. I'll start by saying I wasn't at Hampton, but I did do early and late summer tour. I was really preparing to be a dad for the first time, which, as we all know, doesn't really take much. My daughter's now 14, and she also tolerates my musical taste. My feelings from that tour were obvious, and I didn't really care about critics or sloppy playing or even them playing Time Turns Elastic too much. I was happy they were back, and look at what they had in store for us now.
Hey, this is Eric Gatzek from Newburgh, New York. I remember very clearly the day that the reunion shows were announced. I was at my apartment in the East Village that I shared with my girlfriend at the time. She would later become my fiance, then my wife. We had never seen a show together before because we got together while they were broken up. But we'd been together for maybe a year and a half, 2 years at that point. I was asleep in our bed. She called me from her parents' house because it was the second day of Rosh Hashanah and she'd been there the night before for dinner. She called me and she said, "How would you like to see Phish reunite on your 30th birthday at Hampton Coliseum?" And I said, "Are you fucking kidding me?" She said, "Nope." Rest is history. A couple hundred shows later, we're married, 2 kids, and the greatest 30th birthday party of all time.
This is Jordan Kahn. When I heard that Phish was reuniting, I felt the feeling I forgot and was ready to get back on the train. I couldn't get down to the Hampton shows, but I wound up seeing 17 that year. I remember feeling recharged with a sense of purpose, knowing that Phish was back together, but mostly I felt jubilation and relief. Being a big fan of bands like the Beatles and the Grateful Dead, there was no assurance that they were going to come back, but I'm so glad that they did.
So when Phish announced their return to Hampton in 2009, it wasn't really even something I was looking forward to or expecting or on my radar. I started college in fall 2007 at Hamilton College in upstate New York, which is sort of a jam band centric area. But at that point, they were still very much broken up. It had been 3 years since the official breakup, and I wasn't into jam bands or Phish when that happened. but starting in college in around 07, 08, I started getting into like The Dead and Allman Brothers and Mo and some bands like that were kind of popular when Phish was off. So I remember sitting in my dorm room my sophomore year, and it was like freezing cold outside, and I was sort of cruising the old style Facebook, and I just saw all these people starting to post like, oh, holy shit, it's happening, Hampton, March 2009. And I honestly wasn't even that excited about it or freaking out or anything like that, but I was like, oh, that's cool, maybe I'll try and hit up a show when they come to my area. And they did go to Hartford in 2009 in August, which is where I'm from, that area. So I ended up going to that show. I got a cheap ticket, and I went with some girl that I was kind of seeing at the time. And it was an awesome show. They played Iculus and famous Mockingbird, Psycho Killer, kind of a legendary show for that era. I had no idea at the time because I wasn't even that familiar with their music, but long story short, however many years later, I'm still going to shows, maybe like 50 shows later. So thank you, Phish.
Hey, it's Rachel from Denver, telling you about where I was when Phish announced they were getting back together. But some backstory. So when Phish broke up in August of 2004, I was getting ready to graduate college. And like so many of us of that time, being a Phish fan was a really large part of my identity. So my graduation ceremony was actually the same weekend as Coventry. And like any good fan, I skipped out on my ceremony to attend that disaster of a festival. Coventry over, Phish is over. My time in college, which was one of the greatest times of my life, also over. What do you do? After floundering around for a couple of years, I decided to move abroad to South Korea to teach English, which I enjoyed tremendously, so much that I decided to stick around for several years in Seoul teaching English. So when Phish announced they were getting back together, I was actually at my school in Seoul, South Korea, sitting at my desk. And talk about conflicting emotions, because when I first read it, it was absolute joy. Like I couldn't believe it was happening. But almost simultaneously, like I had a nanosecond of joy. And then it was, God damn it, I live thousands of miles away. I am not going to be there for this occasion. Thankfully, my time in Korea was coming to an end that summer. And a couple of weeks later, Phish announced their 2009 summer tour, the two-parter, so that I was able to see several shows from that tour and many more since. So yeah, talk about one of the greatest, was it an email? I forget how the message came, but talk about one of the greatest messages ever. So yay, Phish.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias, or really, the third and final episode of This Time Will Be Different, 15 Years Since Hampton. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Today's episode ends our look back at what led to Phish's comeback at Hampton Coliseum 15 years ago on March 6, 2009. If you haven't listened yet, previous episodes have covered the pressures that led to the hiatus in 2000, the multi-faceted hot mess that was 2004, and now we're here, the rebirth of the Phish experience in the early spring of 2009. When I first had the idea for this miniseries, I figured that today's episode, the one about Hampton, would be an enormous undertaking. It was a full weekend of shows, easily making up the most important run of the band's career, marking the turning point from the past to the present that would introduce the 3.0 era. Yet, as my co-hosts and I were speaking, Charlie Dirksen and Scott Marks from Phish.net and the Mockingbird Foundation, it became more about our experiences and our personal feelings during that all-important March weekend, more so than an analysis of all 3 nights. In the end, that's what attendance bias is about, each guest's own experience at any given show. There's a lot more of this story to be told, but for now, this love fest about Phish's coming back to life will settle things. To wrap things up, please welcome Scott Marks and Charlie Dirksen of Phish.net and the Mockingbird Foundation as we conclude This Time Will Be Different, Episode 3. Gentlemen, welcome back for our third and final step of this 3-episode arc from attendance bias, but kind of taking our detour here of This Time Will Be Different, 15 years since Hampton. And if I do my job correctly and the world doesn't end before March, this episode should air on March 6, 2024, the 15-year anniversary of Phish's return to the stage, what I would consider one of the most exciting points of maybe my life, certainly of Phish's extended career. But before we get into any of that, Scott, how are you doing?
Doing great. I'm excited for this episode.
Yeah, me too. Charlie, briefly, how are you?
Yeah, as you know, I'm not doing very well, but thank you very much for having me back on, despite the fact that I suck at podcasts.
Jeez. Oh, well, if you did, I wouldn't invite you back.
Eeyore right there. Eeyore
yeah, right. Yeah. Let's get positive. Well, where we left off last episode, we left off right around the time that Trey got arrested in 2006, which was certainly a turning point in Phish's career, and I would imagine in every fan's career, so to speak, and every fan's fandom of the band, everyone's journey, because I think you could draw a pretty straight line from Trey getting arrested to his drug court and community service to probation to the little breadcrumbs that the band left in 2008 for the most part, leading up to the comeback. And just a few steps on that, the breadcrumbs that I mean, I know that Charlie last time mentioned the Mockingbird Foundation Get Phish Back Together fundraiser. And he also mentioned that there were hints throughout the year that there were members of the Mockingbird Foundation who thought that Phish was going to get back in 2008, a full year before they did, or maybe a little less than that. But just a few things. I did a little research since we last recorded. Just a few breadcrumbs that made the announcement on October 1st, 2008, not the most shocking thing in the world, even if it was the most joyous thing in the world. In May of 2008, the Jammies were still a thing. Shapiro was still running them. This was, I think, the 7th version of the Jammies at that time. And Phish was being awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award. And since Trey was no longer under house arrest, he was able to attend, and the band appeared together, although they did not perform at the Jammies in May 2008. Later that month, at the end of May, Trey was interviewed by Rolling Stone, and he was quoted, quote, "When Phish broke up, I made some comment about how I'm not going to go around playing You Enjoy Myself for the rest of my life," Anastasio said with a laugh. And it's so funny because Phish and Mike and Paige have been talking to each other a lot lately. And now it's not that I can't believe that I said that, but it's symbolic of how much I lost my mind or how much I lost my bearings or something. Because at this point in time, I would give my left nut to play that song 5 times in a row every day until I die. I certainly thought about that while I was in jail. And I remember when that quote came out, especially the "I would give my left nut to play You Enjoy Myself."
Yeah, you know what, Brian, I'm really glad you did that. I just had a complete flashback. I think that was the moment I knew Phish was going to be back for sure. There's just no way, Trey would say something like that and Phish wouldn't be back. But you just nailed it. That I just had a flashback, and I remember now that I think that was sort of the key for us. We just knew they were going to be back. And when was that article? When did he make that? When was he quoted saying that?
I believe the article was published. I could be getting this exact date wrong. I know it was May 2008. I think it's May 28th, 2008.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. We knew something was afoot, obviously, in September 2007, because that's when the Phish Reunion Fund was created. But it was definitely rumor, obviously, at that point. But I think by this article, I mean, I'm certain I was convinced they would be back.
Yeah, and adding on to that, adding fuel to the fire, a month later, in June of 2008, Page put out an announcement. I don't even think this was from a publication. He wasn't interviewed by anyone. He said, in part, quote, "I can honestly say that I'm closer with all of them," meaning the other band members, "now than I've ever been in our 20-year relationship." He went on to say that since they all have projects currently in the works, quote, "the announcement of a reunion is premature, but they plan on getting together, quote, to take a look at what possible futures we might enjoy." And he also said that he takes the prospect of a Phish reunion very seriously. And he closed by saying, "Try not to focus too much on secondhand sources and random gossip. If there is anything real to announce, it will come from the four of us as a group." So to your point, Charlie, I know that you said the Trey interview kind of sparked your certainty or your being convinced that there's going to be a reunion. But my thought, even in retrospect, is why would Page even say anything unless there was a reunion on the horizon somewhere? And then the coup de grace before the actual announcement, a few months later in September of 2008, Brad Sands was married, Phish's road manager, and the band did reunite. They went on the wedding band's instruments and they played, I think, 3 songs. And if you go online, even right now, there's like a 1-minute clip of the band playing Julius available. So it just seemed very clear that the heat got turned up under the burners, that they were going to announce something soon. And lo and behold, on October 1st, 2008, Scott, you said you think it was somewhere around 2 a.m, right? That this video was published on Phish.com of an artist almost line by line filling in pieces, a sketch of the Hampton Coliseum that said Phish March 6, 7, 8, 2009.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was overnight. And I woke up that morning and saw the announcement, but definitely didn't see live what was going on.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Scott, when you did see it, whatever time it was, do you remember where you were, how you felt, like to give us a sense, like a window into your scene, your world?
I was at my mom's in Connecticut and saw that in the morning, and obviously was very excited that they're back.
Charlie, do you remember where you were when you saw that announcement or that video?
It's kind of nuts, actually. I was in Washington, D.C. I'd taken a red eye from San Francisco to D.C. overnight into Dulles because my father had an emergency quadruple bypass surgery on the night of September 30th, 2008. So I was like, I think on a laptop in the hospital watching the damn thing, maybe on the October 1st. But yeah, my dad was ultimately fine. They do quadruple bypasses all the time at that hospital. But yeah, I was pretty sure that was it. That was when I watched that video. It was on a laptop in a hospital.
I'm glad you could laugh about it. Honestly, I really am.
It was kind of, it was pretty exciting. I wasn't surprised that they were reuniting. I loved the video. Loved it.
I remember seeing it, well, just a little bit to rewind a little bit. That past summer, the summer of 2008, I was in a new relationship, and my girlfriend was telling me that her father, who was turning 60, I think at the time, she said he wanted to rent a condo in Smuggler's Notch, Vermont, which is near Stowe. And he wanted to take the whole family up there just for like a long weekend, just to celebrate his birthday. And it was a really nice idea. And I remember I was at the stove cooking something, and I said to her, "That sounds great. But if Phish ever gets back together, that's really what I'm going to be doing." And she goes, "What? What do you mean?" I said, "I'm just putting a caveat. We're in a new relationship. You just got to know this about me. If Phish ever announces their reunion, that's what I'm doing." At the time, I was at the beginning of my first full-time salaried year-long job. And as a teacher, I had my summers off. And I just had to keep it out there in the forefront of my mind that I love your dad, although I only met him once or twice at the time. But to me, Phish is the priority, and it's just important for you to know that so I can keep that card in the back of my pocket in case anyone announces a vacation or anything. So that said, fast forward to October, she was in the kitchen that morning. I was having my coffee, and when I watched that video, in her words, I screamed like a little girl. And I had never been more excited for something about Phish. It seemed like everything was back. To me, this was the start of a renaissance. It was like literally a rebirth. You know, even the poster at Hampton was a phoenix rising from the ashes. So to me,
when I caught my first Tarpua in 2003, screamed like a little girl. So
we've all been there. We've all been there. So to me, this was
I can't picture Charlie screaming like a little girl. So I think it's just the two of us that have been there.
Not
oh,
in the
I can.
hospital.
Not in the hospital. Not in the hospital. But yeah, so I remember that. I remember for tickets, I could not get tickets through the online system. I do remember that my girlfriend went to the library to get a second computer, and she was able to score tickets for night 3 of the 3-night Hampton run, and that was all we could come up with. We considered all the different internet scams that people were pretty sophisticated with. We weren't used to being scammed quite yet, I don't think, at least to the familiarity we are now. Anyway, we took a day off. We drove down for Friday night. We didn't get there in time for the show. Saturday, we hung out for the whole weekend, the whole day in the lot and with friends and in hotel rooms. And Sunday, we went to the show. Scott, how did you get tickets?
I got shut out in the on sale. I'd gotten a set of tickets and had an extra set of tickets. And he was going to give the second set to his brother. And it's like, if your brother doesn't want to go, keep me in mind. And so, nothing happens. And I'm out in Ohio, my brother's for Christmas. And I had a double stomach bug and it was just in bad shape and miserable because I couldn't eat anything. And there was good food in the house. And so I'm upstairs on the computer. And there was a message board that I was part of, and I hadn't posted there all week. Hadn't seen anything all week. On vacation. And the title of the thread was, "Guess who's going to Hampton?" And this thing was like 5 pages deep and had been going on for like a week and a half. And nobody was going to tell me until I actually logged into the message board to see it. So it was pretty exciting to find that out. I raced downstairs and was obviously very excited that I was going to be going to Hampton in just a couple of months.
Scott, did you have any expectations going in, or what were your expectations, if any?
I'm not sure what my expectations really were at that point. Just happy to have the band back. And I mean, I don't think I was going to expect a couple of 20-minute jams right out of the gate. The fact that my favorite band was back after, essentially being dead was just all that I wanted. And just being in Hampton, springtime, Virginia, it was just whatever they played, I was happy.
Charlie, how did you get tickets, and what were your expectations once you knew that you were going?
If I remember correctly, I got shut out at the on sale, and a friend of mine who may or may not want me to mention his name got me tickets because he had gotten them at the on sale, I think, or some friends of his had gotten lucky at the on sale. He's the band Animal Mouth, I guess I can say that. My expectations for the shows were through the roof, obviously. I mean, I was just so excited. I'm sure they were higher than they should have been.
I can relate to that because I still struggle with the don't have expectations rule. I like to say that I go in with a completely open and empty mind, but that's not entirely true. But for these shows, I had no idea what to expect. I think I was just so overcome with surprise, joy, excitement, and if this is a thing, positive anxiety. I was just like on the edge of my seat at all times. I had no idea what would happen, although I think a little part of me thought that 1994 Phish would just show up at Hampton and destroy the world for every single show moving forward. Just like a little kid might have the greatest expectations that are unrealistic when you stop to think about them. But the fact that they were back, kind of like what you said, Scott, and the fact that they were playing well hit my expectations and superseded them, because as we discussed last episode, the lows of 2004 were low enough to make a lot of people just toss that year aside right off the bat. But what I do remember is just the pervasive joy and how chill it seemed that whole weekend in and around the Hampton Coliseum. You could really spend the whole day in the parking lot and feel like you're almost at a festival. I had never been to Hampton before. Scott, do you remember for lack of a better word, the vibe, the attitude that was there among the fans that weekend?
Just a party, I think. Everyone was happy that, again, you're outside in March and you're not freezing your ass off.
Yeah, it was a beautiful weekend.
Yeah. I seem to recall it being somewhat warm. Again, coming from the Northeast where, obviously around having warm weather at the start of March. It's just a very festive atmosphere.
It was festive. That's a good word for it. Absolutely. Everyone was there for the right reasons. It seemed that everyone who was there had a big smile on their face. I remember seeing scalpers trying to get upwards of $500 to $1,000 for a ticket. Thank goodness I didn't fall for that, but I saw people like in corners near the Hooters, which is at the front of the kind of like the driveway to the Hampton Coliseum, like huddling and looking at tickets and seeing if they had the holograms or the right barcodes or something like that. But it was just good tension in the air. And when you were inside, man, you talk about feel the feeling I forgot. It really felt that way. It was like being in a time travel machine all of a sudden.
It was fantastic. It was wonderful seeing friends who I hadn't seen in years. That's what I remember the most, other than obviously the Fluffhead opener and the Down with Disease on the third night. The Down with Disease on the third night gave me a lot of hope for the future because it
Did
was,
you scream like a little girl?
Improvisational. No, I did not do that. Although I may have when I first went into the venue on March 6th, because I was, at the front mob of people I'm on the first to go in, and I had to piss like a fucking racehorse. And I remember considering urinating on a police car that was nearby. That's how badly I needed to go. And so I remember that very clearly because I really had to go. And I sort of stumbled my way into the Coliseum on March 6th and started yelling for the bathroom, and whether I sounded like a little girl or not, I do not remember, but but that piss was one of the most incredible urinations of my entire life.
One of the most fortunate experiences.
Yes, it was among the most fortunate experiences of my life.
3-episode arc about Phish coming back at this beautiful, glorious weekend. What do you guys remember from it? When I took that piss, when I came in night one, that felt so good. Oh, and there was music too.
Yeah, the Fluffhead open.
Right.
I remember.
I remember thinking this was also, unless I'm wrong, the first time that Phish from the Road existed, and we could get set list updates in real time. Right, Scott, they were doing your job pretty much.
Yeah, there had been no Twitter in 2.0. I don't know when Phish from the Road actually started, but they've been there pretty much for the entirety of 3.0. My job, if you will, was doing guest tweeting for Youngblog, I think as early as Indio, and then occasionally in 2010. And then I started my own Twitter account in 2011 and have more or less been live tweeting ever since.
My biggest impressions, because again, I was only at night 3, although I immediately downloaded the first 2 nights as soon as I got to the hotel. I remember thinking that it being just the band in the mix sounded so clean. The sound might have been a little thin, they weren't quite dialed in yet. It was the first couple shows, but the band were on point. I was so impressed with how good the vocals were. Immediately that hit me, like how correct the playing was, how vibrant they sounded. Like it didn't matter to me for the first two nights, considering that Down with Disease from night 3, it didn't matter that there were basically no jams to speak of. They were back and they were playing songs from all throughout their history. It wasn't an accident that they opened with Fluffhead, because they didn't play it at all throughout 2.0. It's a statement, and it's a very deliberate statement, in my opinion. And I had gotten so used to a limited set list and song placements in 2.0. It was so refreshing. And the cherry on top, they were free downloads. Everything was right that weekend. Let me ask you guys, other than Hampton or after Hampton, what was your first show back and what do you remember from it? Charlie, what was your first show after Hampton?
The next one. The next one was at Fenway Park.
Same
I just had to be there. Yeah, I had to be there for that. And it was a good show. Wasn't like magnificent or anything, but it was fun to see Phish at Fenway Park, obviously. But I mean, I wasn't there, but like the show that really did it for me once I heard it was the June 7 Camden show in that year with the old school tweezer and really good versions of Fee and Sand. I mean, that show made me think that Phish is going to kill it again, as they had in previous years, and there was a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, Scott, what were your impressions of Fenway Park? Did you feel similarly? Were you just happy to be there and then got the excitement from the music a little bit later from a later show?
So that was, I want to say it might have been the first time they actually had like a video announcement for a show. Have they even done that since, or has it really just been for tours? They used to do all the videos for
mostly
tours.
for tours and festivals.
So first of all, I thought the announcement was fantastic. You have images of Fenway Park. I'm a Red Sox fan. And then you have Josh Cantor, the Fenway organist, cracking his knuckles. And then he starts playing Tweezer Reprise, which was just awesome. So being there for that show, Curtis Lowe bust out, first one since 1993. And I mean, I ended up doing all the shows that first leg, going down to Bonnaroo and then up to Alpine. Just a really special experience that show. For me, being at Fenway, such an old building that's been around for 100 years, and see concerts there. I've seen other bands like Pearl Jam and Police and the Stones, but to have seen Phish there on multiple occasions, just a very cool experience for me.
I can imagine. I have not seen them at Fenway, but I've seen them in a million other places, but that must have been really special, especially since it was the first show of a tour, which is exciting. And for those of you listening at home, Scott mentioned that he did the whole first leg. This summer of 2009, the tour was broken up into early summer and late summer. So it wasn't like throughout the summer. There's a big break right in the center. After Hampton, the first shows that I saw were the Jones Beach run, which was June 2nd, 4th, and 5th. And I was in heaven. Like you said, Scott, you're a Red Sox fan, so it was extra special for you to see the band in Fenway. I was a lifelong Long Islander. So Jones Beach was basically my hometown venue, especially outdoors in the summer. I was in heaven. A lot of my friends came out. It's not an easy venue to get to, by the way. There's not a lot of public transit to get to Jones Beach. You almost absolutely need a car. The little apartment I was living in was kind of the hotel for a lot of my friends, because there's not a lot of other reasons to go to Long Island. So I was thrilled that I was kind of on home turf to see the band for 3 shows, too. It was originally 2, and then when they announced that Fenway show, they added the June 2nd Jones Beach show. So 3 shows in 4 days on my home turf. My friends were all coming in, even though it was rainy, gray, and windy. I think for all 3 shows, with just a few bursts of sunshine, it was heaven. And to me, it was like I was seeing them for the first time all over again. The set lists were really good. There were rarities played like Buried Alive, If I Could, Foam, a pretty good Ghost, especially for the time. They played Twist into Piper with Oye Como Va playing in the middle of it as a tease. And not to mention the debuts of 20 Years Later, Kill Devil Falls, and Stealing Time from the Faulty Plan. So it was this kind of melange of old and new. And these songs that were played, like Buried Alive, I thought I would never, ever see them before 2009. Because if they didn't play it in 2.0, or I didn't see it in 2.0, I was never going to see it. I know I've said this already twice, but this just idea that 3.0 gave everyone a second shot. If you didn't get to see what you wanted to see in Phish's first go round in 1.0 and 2.0, now you get a fresh slate. Everyone is on an equal level. And to me, that was really meaningful and very special. Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode. To wrap it all up on this celebration of 15 years, these are big questions, guys, but I hope that you have something to add to it. What have the past 15 years meant to you, but what are the high points of them for you?
First thing that comes to mind for me is the Baker's Dozen, which is one of those unparalleled things that you may never see repeated by any other band, for the rest of our days. 13 shows, no repeats, 237 songs. There's a clip from Metallica where they're talking about what Phish did, and just their minds are kind of blown. So I mean, it made waves in like the larger music community beyond the jam band universe. There are countless highlights and shows. Utica 2010, Manchester 2010 immediately come to mind. Even much more recently, the fall 2021 tour for what was considered 4.0, if you will, after COVID. Those were fantastic shows as well, night after night. So I mean, there's stuff all over the place where it's just been amazing seeing this band back and healthy and playing and having a good time on stage.
Charlie, what have been some of the most meaningful points, maybe three, if you could, when you think what have the past 15 years meant to you? What Phish experiences come to mind?
I've got to stop you right there. I mean, I can't just pick three, obviously. So I'm not going to do that.
Fair enough.
But I mean, what immediately came to mind when you asked the question initially is just Trey's sobriety. I mean, I think that more than anything else, if I had to pick one thing, it's just that has just been just such an incredible blessing to the community, that he got sober and that he stayed sober. And it's just hard for me to even talk about it without starting to break up, just because it's so overwhelming. I mean, I think it's just an incredible thing. And we're so blessed, frankly, to have him sober, and he's playing, as good as he ever has, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it depends on your point of view. I mean, sure, the May 17th, 1992 Brothers is pretty amazing in terms of Trey's ability, but I mean, it's different. All the band members are playing, I think, extremely well together. And that's the key word, is together. We just have so much to look forward to. And so, I mean, other than Trey's sobriety, I mean, in terms of the musical highlights, as Scott just said, they're countless. I mean, practically every Halloween show is something to talk about on an entire podcast, right? I mean,
yeah.
And they've just been phenomenal. And as someone who was at the 103194 first real, hardcore Halloween show, which, sold out and everybody wanted a ticket to. The Halloween shows in the last 15 years have been, fantastic. I mean, they really have. I think they've all been worth a listen, and some of them have been transcendent performances, and Phish just continues to be one of the most creative bands in the history of rock music.
Signed on to all of that. For me, when I think of what the last 15 years has meant and like what comes to mind immediately, the first thing is the summer of 2015. Personally, I was going through like a transitional year. I was having medical issues toward the end of 2014, seizures. I was diagnosed with epilepsy. It was very rough. And very soon after that, my wife left me. We were divorced very quickly soon after that. I had a very rough first half of 2015. And then went financially and in terms of living space, I was settled by around June. And when Phish announced their 2015 summer tour, I was just all in. So for me, and I know this isn't strictly Phish, but Fare Thee Well leaps to mind because I think it's impossible to talk about 2015 without mentioning it. And then that run, I went to Nashville also, that has an excellent show that year with a sick Weekapaw groove with this kind of like Black Sabbath, heavy, slowed down, heavy metal jam. And that was just the kickoff to see them in The Man and then Merriweather Post and Magnaball. And it just seemed like I was seeing every friend that I had made regarding Phish over the past however many years it was at the time. It all just kind of coalesced, and it helped me find my joy again after a very difficult time. So and New Year's Eve also, by the way, that New Year's run is excellent in 2015. So when I think about high points of 3.0 and what it's meant to me, Phish was there before I had these troubles. Phish was there for me during those troubles, and they're here for me after those troubles. So it's almost like, I know obviously I'm not friends with them. That's very silly, but it's almost like having a friend. And the group that and the community that's kind of developed since social media, for all its ills, has developed, being able to get in touch with someone immediately and kind of get to know someone, whether or not you know each other in person, has been a blessing for my life. And I don't think that would have ever happened had Phish never returned in Hampton in 2009. So for me, it's the big picture as well as the little things as well. I am so grateful to them. I'm so grateful to you guys. I'm so grateful to the larger Phish community for being as positive as we are. And I hope that we have another 15 years looking forward. All right. Well, that said, it's been a journey. This 3-episode arc has felt very meaningful to me to just kind of pick out the positives and the negatives of the Phish journey, from the hiatus to the breakup to the comeback. And so thank you guys. I've said it every episode, but thank you again for being such good sports about it, for revealing information about yourselves and providing anecdotes, emotions, and important information that helps us recognize how lucky we are as a fan base.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on, Brian. It really has been a treat getting a chance to discuss, all these eras of Phish, the breakup. Maybe not. It's such as enjoyable for that subject matter as we had our return of the Empire Strikes Back segment of the trilogy, the last one. But just getting a chance to talk shop, if you will, Phish. For me, my life now is completely different than it was 15 years ago, or Twitter, and just getting a chance to know everybody in the community. So it's had a meaningful thing for me in all those years, being back and being part of the Mockingbird Foundation and Fishnet. While I'm not friends with the band either, the music is there for you and for all of us, for me, in good times and bad times. And it's very special and healing. And I'm thankful for every minute that I've had the shows and for the friends that I've made through this experience.
Brian, thank you very much again for this. I've appreciated it very much. I consider it among the most fortunate Phish experiences of my life. Sorry, just had to add that. My wife just said in the background, "You can be quiet now." But in all seriousness, thank you for doing this. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Guys, take care. I hope to see you soon. And to everyone listening, just to one last thing. If you liked just 1 minute of any of these 3 episodes, please visit the Mockingbird Foundation. Donate anything you can, anything you'd like to. It's going to the greatest cause, music education. And, there's good people on the other end, and it's going to land in the right place. So one last second to plug the Mockingbird Foundation. Charlie, Scott, thanks again. See you next time. And that's it for our final conversation of This Time Will Be Different, 15 years since Hampton. I'd like to thank, of course, everyone out there for listening, whether you listen to just today's episode or the whole mini-series or just one episode of all 3. So thank you so much for your support. Of course, obvious thank yous must go out to Scott Marks and Charlie Dirksen of the Mockingbird Foundation and Phish.net for not only contributing their time, but their thoughts, their stories, their experiences to make this at least what I consider a pretty well-rounded look back at the last 15 years, or at least what led to the kickoff of the last 15 years of the Phish experience. So again, I know I already asked you to visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendance-bias, and I will always encourage you to do that, but also please check out the Mockingbird Foundation. And always, if you have the finances, the ability to spare just a couple of bucks, it always goes to the best cause for music education at the Mockingbird Foundation. Next time, we'll be back with a new episode of Attendance Bias back to the regular format. But for now, kick up your favorite 3.0 show, and please express your gratitude that Phish decided to come back and think about everything that went into it. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.